everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another falconry video. Today's video I'm going to be talking about jesses and equipment for booted raptors. But hold on, if you're not flying a booted raptor, there's something here for you too, I promise. This covers non-booted raptors as well. There's a lot of things we're going to get into, and a lot of theory and a lot of practical stuff that covers both booted and non-booted raptors. So a little something for everybody in this video, and yeah, should be some good stuff. So to jump into this first, how do I put this? We're going into it when you're doing falconry or you're doing wildlife education. Over the thousands of years that falconry has evolved, we have found that jesses are the best way to carry, travel, transport a bird of prey. So jesses wrap around the legs. The legs, raptors have very strong tarsi. The tarsi is, for most raptors, that section of leg before you hit the feet that is scaled. It's not scaled on all birds, but it is on most raptors. So the tarsi are very strong, they're very sturdy, and having some sort of a restraint like that, kind of like a dog. You wouldn't put jesses on a dog. You put a collar or a full body, harness on a dog, and then you have, a leash you walk them on. Well, for birds of prey, the most practical and medically easy thing on a raptor is jesses. Now, in the olden days, there were traditional jesses or one-piece jesses. Now, these were one piece of leather that had certain holes, and it was woven in a way, and that was on your bird. Now, that's worked well, and some people still use them in certain situations and in certain parts of the world. Well, eventually, almari jesses were invented, and almaris are kind of neat. So almari jesses have an anklet that wraps around the tarsi, and then the jess slips through that. Now, in today's world, we have grommets, or in the case of very small birds, we have eyelets. A grommet is a two-part ring that fits together, and then you have a grommet setter of some kind that clamps and puts those two grommets together. Think about like on a flag. Usually the edges of the flag have grommets set into them. An eyelet is a one-sided version of that. So an eyelet is just one grommet, and you have an eyelet setter, it's just smaller, it's lighter weight. So grommets and eyelets work really well. So the idea with an almari jess is the less you have dangling off of your bird when they're out flying, the better it is. The better it is. And the less likely they are to get caught in something, especially with people who are flying falcons. With a falcon, you're trying to get them as free as possible. You're training a falcon to fly thousands of feet above you. You're going out there in the field, taking off the hood, getting them ready and setting it free, and they're taking off. Go up thousands of feet, you're flushing up quarry, they're diving down and catching it. You want as least amount of air resistance as possible. So, leaving the anklets on, but taking out the jesses when you're flying the bird is very common today, especially with flying falcons, but with all of the raptors too. So, that kind of depends on a few different things. We'll get into that in a minute. So that's the basic idea. Normally, I think in the United States, I know in Utah, we're not allowed to use traditional one-piece jesses in the field if we're out hunting and flying. You can use them, like if you're using an education bird or something, or if you're not flying them, maybe during the molt, something like that, you can use one piece. But I think in most states, and maybe the country, it's the law, if you're out flying them, you're supposed to have two-piece jesses, which consist of an anklet that wraps around, and then the jess slides through that, and if you want, you can take the jess off and just leave the anklets on. Now, there are people who have innovated new versions of jesses that completely come off. Some of the falcon flyers have made a type of almari jess that kind of unbuttons, and you have it completely jess-free when it's out flying, which is kind of cool, but it depends. So, freedom. You want your bird to be as free as possible when it's flying. You want your bird to be as uninhibited and have as few things dangling behind. But at the same time, you also have safety concerns. So if you're flying something big like an eagle, you really have to have jesses, because if you're out in the field, especially with anybody else, and let's say you're out in the field and somebody's dog from nowhere comes out and starts running, and your eagle's like, "Oh, I want to go eat that dog." You better have your jesses to be able to restrain that eagle so it doesn't go cause a problem, cause a little catastrophe there. So jesses are very important. And even though most raptors have scales on the legs, they're still very delicate. Most of this video is inspired on talking about booted raptors. What are booted raptors? Booted raptors are raptors that have feathers going down their tarsi. Now, those feathers might be very dense. They might be very sparse. And the skin underneath might be tough, or it might be very weak. It totally depends on the bird. So in this video, I'm going to kind of talk about the principles of this, and then I'm going to go kind of species by species, taxon by taxon, and talk about different, including unbooted birds that benefit by some of the techniques and some of the equipment that I use and have innovated. So again, even if you're not flying a booted bird, it still makes sense. So let's take a look. So a booted bird, take a look at something like golden eagle, for example. Golden eagle is going to have, feathers going down the legs. And when you're making equipment, normally that anklet that you're going to make for most raptors is going to be probably something like kangaroo hide, or calf skin, calf skin, something like that. And it's a little different because if you've got booted feathers, you want to make sure that just doesn't damage those feathers or the skin underneath. It's very, very important. So how do we do that? What do we do about this? Well, first and foremost, I am putting a link in the description down below. I made a video years ago on how to make jesses for owls. Most owls have booted legs. They're feathered all the way down, even to their toes. And what happens is, it's not so bad for a baby, but if you have a new owl from scratch, especially one from the wild, that's not a baby, and you put jesses on, they start picking at it, and they might even pluck their own feathers. So I developed a type of jess system that has fur on the inside and out, and so not only does it offer a softer, a surface area on those jesses, but it also visually resembles the bird's own feathers. So in the case of when I started innovating this for great horned owls, then the great horned owls would see that and they're like, oh, yeah, this jess feels weird, but I look down and I'm only seeing what appears to be my own feathers. I just use white rabbit fur, match their leg feathers, and it worked out okay. So I am putting a link into the video where I show how to make these jesses. So this video isn't going to show how to make them. This video is going to explain which birds to use, what, and why. And but if you want to see that video, just follow the link in the description of this video. So let's start off with owls, since that's kind of what I started with. So most regular owls of all sizes, from great horned owls, which is the biggest owl here in Utah, or Eurasian eagle owls, which are among the biggest owls in the world. These owls are heavily booted on their legs. However, under their legs, their skin is incredibly delicate. So for a lot of them, having a nice firm anklet can be bad. So for these, I make a slightly larger than normal jess. I go ahead and do just a normal, just an owl Murray jess with the grommets, but I make it a little bigger than normal, and I glue it both sides. I glue rabbit fur folded around. So watch the video link, and any of the birds where I'm talking about making a fur anklet, just follow the link in the description. You'll see how to do that. So I highly recommend this for any owl at all, period, but especially those that are more heavily booted. Now, I've even done this for my tiny owls. When I've done it for screech owls or, not flammulated owls. Oh, I'm not awake today. Sawwood owls, screech owls. I've done the same technique, and I used an eyelet setter instead of a grommet setter, and the fur I used was weasel fur, ermine fur. And it's very fine, very small, very short, and it's perfect. It works perfect. So there's always a type of fur available, and you can also, if you have long fur, you can always trim it shorter, but it's something that works well. Now, I've seen a lot of people with big owls that they just use regular anklets. And if you see it, you will see that it is going to largely rub off those feathers. So one of the considerations is, how much is my bird baiting, jumping? Is it jumping a lot? If it is, well, then maybe you need fur anklets. But if it's a baby that, hey, I raised this baby, eagle eye, I've raised it from a baby and it's chill, just likes to hang out with me, it rarely jumps, then, you can get away with having a nice leather anklet on. You just have to keep an eye on how it impacts those things. Now, barn owls are kind of an exception. Barn owls do have feathers on their legs, but it's very thin. It's very sparse. And as such, that you can get away with having anklets. However, barn owls have such oversized legs. Their tarsi are huge, and their legs are huge, and their posture, the way they stand, the way they jump. I recommend having a wider anklet. Whether you do, I've done fur anklets, and I've done just regular leather anklets. I've done them both on barn owls, but make them wider, so they go up further. What that does is, if that barn owl jumps, then any impact from that jump on the tarsi is more broadly dispersed. And so it's causing less friction and less tension on those tarsi bones, which you do not want. So that's for barn owls. Most owls have fairly short tarsi. Barn owls are huge, so it's a consideration. I'd say the same thing. Burrowing owls are a lot smaller, but a lot of the burrowing owls I've done a wider anklet as well, and it just seems to go better. Okay, so now we're going to jump into eagles, to Aquila eagles. Now, the Aquila eagles are the true eagles, which is the lineage that golden eagles are from. Golden eagle's kind of the king of the Aquila eagles, but I mean, there's anything of a rose eagle, an Australian wedge-tailed eagle, a tawny eagle, a steppe eagle. All of these are the true eagles, and all of them are heavily booted from the time they're young. Now, I have worked with many eagles, bald end eagles and golden eagles, and a little bit with harpies and stuff. But the thing is, I've worked with babies, I've worked with adults, I've worked with falconry birds, I've worked with education birds, and that's a lot of bird. That's a lot of weight. It's a lot of power. So you have bigger considerations. Like, for example, what kind of material do I use to make these jesses out of? Oh, well, we might have some nice strong leather. Well, what if the eagles some of these eagles love to just sit in the bath pan for like an hour and just sit around. I'm just sitting here with my feet soaking. Well, that's going to dry out the leather if you have jesses made out of leather. You do not want a jess to break on an eagle for any reason. So what do you do about this? Well, kind of my mentor originally with working with eagles was Steve Shingren, who is a world-class falconer and a world-class wildlife educator. And he's worked with eagles of all different kinds and all different capacities. And what he showed me, what he did, is he's like, I use climbing webbing, the really thick climbing webbing. And he kind of had made up a pattern and had done it. And so what he had basically done, so okay, so he kind of made up a hybrid. So you've got traditional jesses that are made out of one piece of leather that interweaves and doesn't come off. And then you have Almary jesses that have an anklet that's grommeted on and then the jess slips through. He made up a little bit of both. What he did is he took a traditional jess design, and then when it wove through, on the back end where you'd have one big section of jess sticking off, he just cut it, and with those two flaps sticking off, then he would grommet that. So we would make that out of climbing webbing, and he had somebody who would cut and sew them up for him and do them, and had a really good design, good slick design. And it worked well. It worked well. Now, I was new to it, and I was young and gung-ho, and I'm like, okay, how can I improve on this design a little? What can I do? So for my female eagles, I did and still do climbing webbing, but instead I wanted the notches to go a little better. So instead of just having slits cut to weave this, hopefully I still have. I'm going to see if I have any of these around. If I do, I'll post a little clip of this in with it. But basically, I cut out notches that would match, and I did it with wood burning tool. If you got those little wood burning kits, you can buy those for pretty cheap, probably less than $20. So you plan out your jess, and you burn it, and you melt out your design, and then you put it around, and you're actually going to do, for every jess, you're going to have 2 grommets. So normally you have a positive and a negative grommet set, and the grommet setter sets them together. Well, with these, you have, once it's all woven, you have a grommet on one side, both ends, a grommet on the other side, and you're set. So that works really well. So there's a lot of different ways to go about that, but the nice thing about climbing webbing, it's more than strong enough, and it is, it'll handle the heat, the cold, and the wet if an eagle wants to sit and get wet all the time. But the problem with this is, when you get a brand new eagle, they might be baiting a lot, and that's a lot of birds. So what I usually do is I'll usually do either coyote fur, or I used a lot of opossum fur. That seemed to work really well too. And I'll make jesses that have fur on them, but it's climbing webbing underneath, and I hand sew it on. And usually for the first 2 weeks it's on, and eventually it wears off on its own, or the eagle pecking and pulling at it, and by that time they're not really baiting. They're doing pretty good. The training's going well, and so it's okay that it's not there. You can just go with the climbing webbing. That's what I did for my female eagles. For my male eagles, I took the same design, but I did it out of leather. So what I did is I would take a thin piece of vegetable tan hide. This is tooling leather that you normally use for, like if you're doing leather working, where you got the leather punch and you punch the little shapes in. You take a square piece of tooling leather, and then on the back side I would use moose hide, and I would use barge leather glue that together, and make the same thing. But I didn't use grommets, because I just used that thick tooling leather and punched the holes and just put a nice braided eagle jess through that. Now that design worked really well for the male eagles. For whatever reason, my female eagles like to sit in the water a lot more than my males did. But that's a good jess system. It works well. So, but again, the consideration with eagles is how much abrasion is happening. Now an eagle can handle more abrasion than an owl can, but you still want to keep those feathers as intact as possible and keep those legs nice and healthy and not getting roughed up. So climbing webbing, again, you use it delicately, and I do recommend putting fur on it at first, but otherwise climbing webbing can work, or you can do a mix with leather. But that's kind of the best way to go about it with eagles. You have to know your eagle, and you have to constantly adapt, because eagles are such strange and intelligent birds. Some of them can be so aggressive and bouncing off the walls, and some of them are so gentle you can just cuddle them on your lap. That's going to dictate what you're doing and what equipment you're using. So the next bird that we're going to go into is ferruginous hawks. Ferruginous hawks, they're the largest boodio or buzzard in North America. They're really big, and they're very, very strange birds. They're heavily booted, but their skin under the feathering on the legs is pretty tough, especially as adults. Now, I helped jess up a juvenile ferrugi recently, and again, you just see just how densely they are feathered. And again, so the same thing is, I've always done this, usually the fur that I use is either pine marten fur or fisher fur. I mean, you can do anything. You can do rabbit. I've for other people, I've done rabbits when it's not my own bird. I've done rabbit fur. So I always like to start a ferruginous hawk off with a fur-lined anklet, just to reduce the abrasion. And then you get to see your bird, and you get to see how the bird behaves. Some ferruginous hawks are insane, and they're always always freaking out. And if that's the case, maybe they always need to have fur anklets. But again, otherwise, if the bird settles down and is becoming a really good bird, you guys are working out really well, then you can go to regular anklets after a few months. Once they know what they're doing. But just, yeah, you can do both. And I've known some great falconers who have flown ferruginous hawks, and they've done both. I had the opportunity to fly for a season or two a hybrid between a ferruginous hawk and a black red-tailed hawk, and that was a weird bird, really cool, really weird. But the bird kind of had both. The legs, they had some feathering on the legs, but at the same time, it was only partial, and it would come back every year, but it just had partial. And we see the same thing. We see wild hybrids. I've got photos that birders have sent me of like wild ferruginous hawk red-tail hybrids, or wild red-tail rough-legged hawk hybrids. And if you look at the legs, it's like, oh yeah, I can see you kind of have feathering there. But again, they can put up with a fair amount of punishment, but you want to ease them into it. So what I mean by punishment is, of course, they can put up with abrasion, a fair amount of abrasion underneath that, because the scales underneath, where you're talking a pure pure ferruginous or a ferruginous red-tail hybrid, either way, I do recommend starting off with fur-lined anklets, and then letting the bird ease into it, and then eventually going to regular anklets. But again, this is just a general rule. Some people have radically different views in falconry. And I've heard some people say, hey, the thinner the anklet, the better as far as stress. And I totally disagree. The broader the anklet is, the more it's going to disperse energy if the bird jumps. So even if you're any bird, I recommend making it wider instead of thinner normally, just because it's going to be easier on the leg itself. So now rough-legged hawks, I fought tooth and claw to make sure that we had those on our list of legal birds in Utah. We always had it for years, and then they were threatening to take it away. I'm like, no, I've flown several, and I really love them. I think they're really cool birds. They're a type of Arctic buzzard that ranges down here into Utah. So if you ever want to fly those, treat it just like an owl. Just put a big old huge poofy white fur anklets on there. Use rabbit fur, and just follow that video link I have to the owl jesses. It'll do great, and they'll love it. They're just like, oh, this is nice. This is kind of cozy. I think it works well. Now, hawk eagles. We have there's two separate lineages of hawk eagles. There's Spizatus and Nicetus. There's the Old World hawk eagles, the New World hawk eagles. They look really similar, but they're not closely related at all. But it doesn't matter. We're talking about function here. All of these birds have big, deep, huge, old feathers on their legs. So again, they're similar to a ferruginous hawk in that, again, I highly recommend you start off with a nice poofy fur to begin with, and then after a few months, if they're doing okay with it, then just go ahead and switch them out to the regular anklets. But I think it's kind of a fun, cool look, honestly. I think, some people think it looks dumb, but I think it looks cool having a bird with poofy fur anklets. So, so all the hawk eagles, ornate hawk eagles, mountain hawk eagles, I'm just trying to think of ones most people fly. In the States, if anybody has one, usually it's an ornate hawk eagle. They're really cool birds. But again, these are birds that are not too much bigger than a ferruginous hawk. Not too much. And so you're dealing with the same amount of pressure and a similar booting on the legs. So again, for these birds, I just recommend doing fur, give them 2 months, and then reevaluate. And if they haven't torn up the jesses and they're not baiting a lot, just go back to normal jesses. If they haven't torn it up at all and it's doing good, just keep them on. Just keep the fur, and it works great. So the next one are Harris hawks. Now, Harris hawks, they do not have booted legs, and they have incredibly long tarsi that dissipate heat, which is bad if you're in a cold area in the winter. Harris hawks are arguably currently the most popular raptor to fly in the world. Arguably, I mean, some people would say otherwise, but I think by the numbers, they have revolutionized the sport all over the world, and they're a fairly newcomer to the sport. But their legs, they've got these big bare legs, and in the winter, their legs and their feet get so cold, and especially if you're in a very bitter climate. Y'all still hunt them in the cold, but I mean, they get really good. Like, you can ball up their feet and just kind of warm up their feet. I'll put them in my coat, and they're like, okay, I'm just staying warm in the coat while we're walking. Oh, there's a rabbit, pull it out, go flying. But you know what? Might as well help with that a little bit. So in the wintertime, especially if it's a very cold winter, I will do fur anklets the same as the owls on my Harris hawks. They seem to like it. They seem to cozy up to it really well, and it just provides them that extra warmth. So again, that's not so much about abrasion as much as it is, because it's not trying to damage anything, but it's more about just offering some warmth. So last one that I want to bring up isn't normally a booted bird, but that is a gyrfalcon. And I want to bring this up because not a lot of people fly pure gyrfalcons. They might be my favorite bird to fly. They're one of my top 3. They're cantankerous, they're obnoxious, they're hard-headed, they're smart, they'll test you, but I love them. But they have ridiculously short tarsi. In fact, on average, they're the biggest falcon in the world. But smaller species than them, like peregrine falcons and prairie falcons, typically have longer tarsi than they do. She's like, wait, what? Why? Well, heat dissipation. Remember, Harris hawks have these big old long tarsi to dissipate heat because they're from hot climates. Gyrfalcons are from cold climates, so having very short tarsi works to their advantage. Helps them keep in their heat. But when you're making jesses, that can be really hard. Now, a traditional jess doesn't work super well, so I want to bring up the rolled jesses. If you're making an anklet, you just roll the top and the bottom straight over, and that works really, really well for gyrfalcons. Now, I know they're not booted, but I'm putting them in because sometimes they are. About a third of the gyrfalcons I've had have had booted tarsi, partly booted tarsi, and even feathers in between their toes. So, nature goes every direction that it can. And if you're a cold weather bird, over time, some of you developing feathers on your toes, it's a good thing. It's going to keep you warm, kind of just like snowy owls. Snowy owls, even the bottom of their feet is covered with feathers. So, that's why I still loved them in, even though they're not booted in any way. I still think having a unique type of jess system like that, it works so much better, especially where gyrfalcons require such a narrow jess that it just works much better to do the rolled jess instead of a normal cut jess or something similar to that. So that's the basics of kind of my thoughts on it. And again, you can never go wrong. There's no bird really that you couldn't do fur jesses on. It could even be a fashion thing. Like I think about some of the old fancy traditional, they still make them today, but from medieval times, the hoods that were all had the big old feathers sticking out in every direction are really decorative and ornamental. It's like we could be that way with jesses. We could be like, you know what? Having fur jesses, it's going to cause less abrasions for any birds. Let's just do it. I'm not suggesting we do that, but if we did, there'd be nothing wrong with it. So always keep an eye on the bird's legs because they have good circulation on the inside, but not the skin. And so any injury to a toe or to a foot can go really bad, really fast, and it has a very difficult time healing. So it's important to keep feet as healthy as possible. And again, part of doing that is on these booted birds, making sure you have some sort of plan to reduce the amount of abrasion that could occur from them baiting or being jessed up. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you've done, what's worked well for you. And again, follow that link if you want to see how to actually make these jesses. Links in the description. And if you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe, I very much appreciate it. It helps me keep this channel up and going. And as always, happy hawking.